Hello, everybody. Welcome to Talk About House. I'm Todd.
I'm Juana.
Apparently, somebody has found a new way the housing market will crash.
Yes.
The housing market is so unstable. If everything is not perfectly operating, it could potentially crash. And so he found this article, and it comes with a tweet and a bunch of other data. Rich Dad Poor Dad author Robert Kiyosaki says Airbnb is set to spark a real estate market crash.
Right. But in all fairness, he says that a lot as far as market crashes.
He is the market crash predictor. So we've had, let's go over all the things. The pandemic was going to crash the housing market. The recession the pandemic caused was going to crash the housing market. Then the war in Ukraine was going to crash the housing market. Then inflation was going to crash the housing market. Then the interest rates were going to crash the housing market. The next recession was going to crash the housing market. And
Student loans.
Student loans were going to crash the housing market. Consumer debt was going to crash the housing market. Foreclosures was going to crash the housing market. None of those have happened.
Right.
Okay, so now it's going to Airbnb's fault. Here's the actual tweet. You can see it's not a tweet anymore.
It's an X.
It's an X post. I think it's just called a post on X. Airbnb to lead real estate market crash. If you want a new home, your happy days are around the corner. Same for rental property. The best time to get rich is in a crash. Good luck. What scares me the most is that 2.4 million people saw this. That's the data. And 18,000 hearts, about 2,500 retweets. So 2.4 million people, this showed up on their thing when they were looking. Feeding more, basically like propaganda misinformation, right?
Well, yeah, but I mean, this is a man that has a lot of eyeballs, right? He's all over the news all the time, all kinds of different shows that are entertaining lots of people, and he is entertaining people with his predictions on X.
This is the guy who basically said the way to build wealth is through income-producing assets.
Right.
And we're going to go through some of this in here. Okay, so here's the first bullet point. The next crash in real estate could be set in motion by Airbnb. The Rich Dad Poor Dad guru has sounded the alarm for months of a coming market crash. No, I found tweets from 2022 where he said the real estate market was getting ready, like it was literally getting ready to crash in 2022. And here we are a year later, it's still getting ready to crash. And then here's the next quote. But data shows that the rental market is fairly healthy with just a small decline in profits.
Right.
So apparently, so we have the quote. Now, what triggered this? Let's talk about this first, because this leads to a bunch of misconceptions. Okay, so I'll read this quote. Airbnb, the online rental platform, recently saw its number of short-term units plunge by 70% in New York City after a new law was passed that requires Airbnb owners to register with the city if they plan to rent their homes out for less than 30 days. Number of available rentals plunged 70% the days after New York City began enforcing the rules. So we've gotten Airbnbs in New York City.
Right. So here's the thing. Different municipalities or governmental entities have been trying to enact protectionist laws and rules and regulations that help the hotel industry, because that's a big industry. And this is just another attempt in that direction. Now, people who are savvy, people who are resourceful, tend to get around this. Okay. I mean, there are all kinds of ways to get around this. One of the ways that we've seen people get around this is they say, well, I'll go ahead and put my property on a short-term rental site, and I'll put on there that I'm renting it for 31 days, but you and I will kind of wink, wink, and you can have it for 7 days, and then I'll just put it back up because you just moved out early. So there you go. This happens all the time. There are lots of different protectionist measures out there, and New York is not unique in this. San Francisco has done it. Lots of places have done it, both big and small. Vegas has done it, of course, because we have a huge hospitality industry that has lots of high-paid lobbyists that make it a point to protect their interests. So this does happen everywhere. And, the market at some point kind of figures it out and settles down.
The other thing they do, and we've actually had this happen to us, they'll register one place. Because remember, every time you register, like in Vegas, it's pretty, so it's very strict in Vegas. You have to pay, I think it's $1,000 fee to register your property. And then there's limits to like how close, they can't be within 220 yards of any other short-term rental. So like Vegas, we have extremely difficult, we've always had them. They've always been pretty strictly enforced. So what they'll do is they'll register one and they'll always have it on Airbnb, even if it's actually rented. And then when you go to book it, they'll go, hey, you booked this place, but it's not available, but we've got another place in the same building. It's the same price. Right. And then, so we've had them flip us to another place in a city because they just said, hey, look, that one's available. And I think that happened in Belfast. We booked a place in a building and he goes, that's not available. I have another one in the same building. And they just put us in the other one because I'm sure Belfast has, the same thing. Right. So just because you see the numbers dropping on the site, it's because they're trying to get around the government.
Right. So to Todd's point, let's say that there are multiple units in a building. You put one unit up and not the rest of them, and then you rent out the rest of them and not necessarily the unit that's actually up on the board. And you can get around things. People get around things all the time. So this is just going to be a new way for people to find creative ways to deal with it.
And it's only in New York City right now that this is an issue. Here's another. This was another quote from the article. A viral X post in June claimed that Airbnb rental profits have collapsed over 40% in major metropolitan cities, but that was later debunked in a study using a larger data set from the analytics firm AirDNA, which found that the average revenue per available rental has actually declined just 3.6% over the past year. One, it doesn't make sense to me that in an economy that's growing, which it is now, travel is growing 12 to 15%, travel and leisure and hospitality, that Airbnb would be down 40%. And they said that in 2020, Airbnb was down quite a bit because people were locked down. Nobody was really able to travel.
Right.
But clearly misinformation that 40 or 70% or whatever. And then here's the other misnomer. Oh, all these people are going to sell. So let's talk about the markets where they've restricted Airbnbs. Dallas. Airbnbs became banned, short-term rentals. There's only 1,000 of them. And guess what's happened in prices in Dallas since they banned?
They're up.
They're up. Santa Barbara, that was supposed to crash the local market when they banned short-term rentals there, made it really strict. Guess what happened? Nothing. Home prices went up. Ocean Beach, Pacific Beach in San Diego, remember? Oh, we're going to ban all the Airbnbs. People were like, oh, but we bought this place to make it an Airbnb. And guess what happened? Prices are up. Go try to buy a place. Go try to buy a super cheap place on the beach in San Diego and see, tell me how much prices have. There's like, people take this small anecdotal information, they try to extrapolate it into something big, and certainly not the case, right?
Well, and a lot of times, you see these headlines, and the headlines don't always have a whole lot to do with what's in the actual article. And then even what's in the actual article, like there's no one behind it to be held accountable for the data. So that's the other thing you have to keep in mind. A lot of times you just have to do a little more digging to figure out what's really going on.
Here's another quote from the article. The rental market outside of platforms like Airbnb also appears to be relatively buoyant. Rents came close to notching another all-time high last month. Redfin data shows thanks to tight competition amid limited supply. We talked about this on yesterday's video. One had a property management client. She put their rental up and over 100 people inquired about, is it still available, right? That is not, and even if somebody had bought a property as a short-term rental and completely was like, they were completely banned, like they were going to be very strictly watched, they would probably just turn it into rental. But this idea that everyone would be forced to sell and all this other stuff. And remember, a lot of these people that bought these short-term rentals have owned it for a long period of time. Many of them were either paid off or almost free and clear. A lot of them have super low loans. So they don't really have to they could just make it a long-term rental and still make money. The other thing too is that they don't have to have them fully rented. I mean, the margins on short-term rentals are really high. You don't have to have it fully rented the whole time. So there's other ways to get around this, but this idea that everyone would just dump their real estate because of something that has never actually happened.
Right.
Not in markets. Okay, here's the other thing I thought was interesting. Okay, if you go on X and you go look at his tweets, you'll see that he tends to be a bit extreme in his, they said bombastic in this, but I'll read it and this will explain it, I think. Kiyosaki, for what it's worth, is known for his bombastic tweets and has regularly sounded the alarm for a coming market crash. So he's been talking about not only a real estate market crash, but a financial market crash, okay? He's also repeatedly urged his followers to buy up real estate and other assets like silver and Bitcoin to hedge against inflation, which he believes is systemic. So he was saying in 21 that you should be buying as much real estate as you can get your hands on. But remember, in 21, home prices already gone up 20%. So by December 21, he was saying, buy up real estate. It's a great income producing asset, yada, yada, yada. A year later, he was talking about the crash, and he was saying you should go buy Bitcoin. The most latest tweet he had was silver. You should be buying silver right now, which doesn't want how much income does silver produce when you rent it out?
None. It just seems to me like he's behind the trend rather than leading the trend.
Yeah.
And that's always a concern I have about people who are out there making these statements. Kind of look at where they are in that cycle of the trend, because if they're just following everybody else and their followers are not leaders, and in this instance, I think that he's a follower, not a leader. And if anything, I think that his advice is poorly timed.
Anybody who makes their money selling a book or their program or monetizing their, significantly meaning if they make more money monetizing their content than they actually make in practice, I would be highly suspicious of that. Mm-hmm. We've talked about this a lot back when the flippers came on TV. We got to ask a question. Somebody said, oh, you're in Vegas. You must know those two famous flipping people on TV that flip houses in Vegas. And I'm like, never heard of. I said, what are you talking about? They said they have a show on HGTV. I said, what are their names? They said their names. I said, I said, Wanda, have you heard of these people? Never heard of them. So I asked one of my buddies he was our trustee sale guy. He was our guy that sat the trustee sale, who was 300 or 400, bought and flipped over 300 or 400 houses. Have you heard of these people? He says, I've never heard of them. Who are they? Well, they're not flippers. All they did is they just they got this HGTV show to Bruce, like they actually are like these huge flippers. They flip these. Trust me, the people who are flipping all these properties, they don't have time to do a TV show about flipping. They're not going to show the world their techniques and how they do it. And certainly, including us having flipped a bunch of houses, when we watch these shows, we're like if you're actually doing this, you're doing a terrible job, because you don't buy a house for $300,000 and put $200,000 into it to flip it, right? Mm-hmm. You're certainly over, and it takes months. It takes longer to get your money back. So I've always kind of wondered when I see the people who they don't actually they don't sell real estate anymore. And a lot of these people were doing real estate and then they just become influencers. I'm not going to say the names, but you guys know who they are. And they make, tens of thousands of dollars a month just talking about housing crashes and getting eyeballs on their stuff with every made up conspiracy they can think of, Airbnb being the most recent one. Right.
Some of them even run for governor.
Some of them run for governor. That's funny.
Yes.
So
anyway.
So what do you think, Wanda? Look, this is pretty, like Airbnb is going to crash the housing market. It's almost laughable. It'd be like saying Zillow's going to crash the house. It was like Zillow was going to put real estate agents out of business. In 2006, that's what they said in the papers. They would you wouldn't need a real estate agent. You would just go to Zillow and Zillow would handle the whole transaction for you. And then remember when Zillow started doing the house flipping, you would only ever sell to Zillow and Opendoor. I think Zillow and Opendoor in Vegas do less than 1% of all home sales. Mm-hmm. Other 99% are done through realtors.
Right.
So I'm still waiting for the calamity to happen.
So here's the thing about Airbnb. So let's for a moment decide that he's right. That every Airbnb is going to cease to exist as an Airbnb, and it's going to have to be a regular house. Right. So what happens to it? Let me think about that. The property was purchased as an investment. It was purchased to generate income. So it will be then put into the rental pool, most likely, to generate income. So it's still not coming on the market to be sold. Will some be sold? Of course. Will there be enough sold to make any difference in the market? Probably not. What if every single Airbnb was actually put up for sale? Okay, so there aren't that many.
There aren't that many.
Okay.
It's a bit.
So let's
worldwide. I want you guys to guess how many Airbnbs worldwide, in the whole world. We're talking the world.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, right. Put your answer down. Think about it. Come up with a number. Remember, there's 8 billion people in the world. 8 billion people in the world?
Something like that.
Okay, ready for this? It just broke 7 million worldwide. We have 140 million houses in the U.S. So even if all 7 million were in the U.S., it's not enough to move the needle.
Exactly. Okay, if all 7 million were in the U.S. and they all went up for sale, then we would actually be caught up with our needs for housing.
Probably. That would make a huge difference.
Okay. That doesn't mean that we would have more housing than we can absorb. It means that we would be caught up with our needs for housing. So, again, not
But they're not all. Less than half of them are in the U.S.
Of course they're not.
Most of them are not in the U.S. Most of them are all over the world.
Right.
So we've stayed all over the world in every. Matter of fact, in Romania, everywhere we went in Romania, we stayed in Airbnb except for in Sinaia. Because there were no Airbnbs in Sinaia. They didn't have any there.
Well, we stayed at a nice hotel in Bucharest.
It was a nice hotel. Oh, we stayed at a nice hotel in Bucharest, yeah.
Yes, but we have stayed at Airbnb in Bucharest.
We've stayed at Airbnbs in Croatia and all over the place.
Right, so the point is that there simply are not enough Airbnbs to move the needle no matter what happens, whether they turn into the rental market or the resale market. There just are not enough to make a difference. And yes, government is trying to help people again. Bless their hearts. And with all these regulations, and it's just making people get more creative, as usual. So anyway, this is our story on Airbnb. Let us know your Airbnb story, because everybody's got one, right?
Yep.
Let us know your Airbnb story. Leave us some comments. Remember to like the video, subscribe, hit the notification bell, share the video, and we'll see you on the next video. Bye.
Bye.